Hi folks, you're with Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about something I've raised a number of times before, and that is social trust. Now, I've been banging on about social trust for quite a few years now, and it seems to me, I sit back as a concerned citizen watching the aggressive, almost vicious dismantling of Western society, social trust, being dismantled by the globalists, and aggressively so. And no one, or very few, seem to comment on it or understand its relevance or its importance in the social cohesion that in the West we often take for granted, or certainly have for quite a long time. Now, was the social trust sort of prior to the globalists coming along, was it ever 100% perfect all of the time with everybody in every interaction? No, of course not. Was it very high on a relative basis and world standards? Well, yes, it was. Now, I didn't realize social trust was, or the difference in social trust, until I started traveling on business internationally. And there you have to, I was paid to negotiate contracts and conduct business transactions all over the world. So I got to see the different levels of social trust, of which I was blissfully unaware of previously. I just assumed that the social trust in Australia was give or take, few percentage points either side, give or take, was about the normal sort of baseline. So I was very surprised when you step outside of first world countries, suddenly the amount of social trust plummets unless you're dealing in a very small, like, family group or a small tribal group. But as a general rule, I can't think of any exception, actually, the amount of social trust was very low. Now, there are various reasons for that. The social trust in those countries is low, and then there's sort of defensive insecurities that they have in relation to dealing with white people from high trust countries. And they misinterpret the offering of high trust, which I initially offered to everyone I was doing business with. I just assumed they were trustworthy. That was my beginning point. But frequently proved wrong, by the way, to have that view. But that was my beginning point when I dealt with these third world people, that the baseline of trust in the first world country like Australia or Britain back in the day was the same. I would extend that level of trust or the belief in trust to them. They saw it differently, and you need to understand that low trust societies see sort of sinister goings on in ways that if you come from a high trust society, you can barely imagine it or conceive that such a frame of thought or way of thinking things through as possible. So they would see, well, the reason you're acting, that they would perceive me as the white boy from a high trust society, the reason you're acting as if you're bestowing huge trust in us is because you've already hatched your evil plan to deceive and rob us and steal from us and take from it. You've already done that, and that means you're just so confident that your plan has already worked and taken effect that you can pretend you're giving us or accepting us in a level of social trust that you think is normal, but really it's a devilish plot by the evil white devil to take from us. So they'd see it that way. So the more you would attempt to deal with them on a trustworthy basis, the more they would think it's a trick. And you see that in other third world countries, whether it be even people that come to Australia and have been here quite a while. Just a recent example, I've used this before, was I was doing in the car, doing like a 5-point turn in a narrow street and trying to turn around and go back the other way. And this driver came along and said to be Chinese. So, realizing that I was going to take sort of a million years to do all these turns, I pulled into a driveway and waved him on. So I don't want to hold you up while I'm doing my stuff. Now again, that you think that, well, that's nothing, that's fair enough, but that is actually a high trust society action, because when the Chinese guy looks at it, or the third world guy, doesn't have to be Chinese necessarily, but in this instance, the Chinese guy looks at it, he goes, this is just a trick. You're just trying to get me to drive down there so you can drive into me. And so this is a trick. This is a damn fucking trick. This is not you just being courteous. So they see the world very differently because they come from low trust societies where all sorts of scams, deceptions, frauds, trickery, treachery is the norm because it's a low fucking trust society. That's why they behave that way. And once the low trust cycle is entered into, it then perpetuates itself. Now, there are sidebar issues as well, such as these people have no concept of creating new wealth through higher productivity, or instead they look at, they perceive that there's a fixed pot of money in the world and there's no way you can get more of it through higher productivity or better organisation, so they don't perceive that. So the only way you can get more money is you take someone else's money. Given everyone is trying to take your money, then whoever's the best at trickery and treachery and swindling, whoever's the best at that is going to come out on top. So that's how you do. But so again, once that low trust cycle is entered into, it just becomes self-perpetuating. It's very hard to get out of it once it's gone into. And this intrigued me because the countries that I went to that were low trust, and this is a number of third world countries. And by the way, some of these dirt poor third world countries, they have a very small elite who are filthy fucking rich. And rich beyond your wildest imagination. They may have got that through cronyism and nepotism and all sorts of corruption, but very, very rich. One of this third world country that I did quite a bit of business with, one of their representatives came out to visit the office in Australia, and so we spent some time talking, and I wined and dined them and did the normal thing you do to people at that level and who do that amount of business. And so they said, "Do you mind dropping me off at such and such?" So I took them to a certain address, and this is one of the wealthiest postcodes in Australia. So I was, I thought, what are they doing there? And this is our Australian house, they said, and it was a fucking mansion and again, this is in one of the wealthiest posts. It's got acreage, a swimming pool, tennis courts, the whole 9 yards. I mean, the thing would be 10 to 12 times the average house price, if not more. In fact, it would have been easily more than that. So this is sort of wealth these people have. So you got this small, super corrupt, super wealthy elite in even the poorest third world countries. So anyway, the social trust is very, no one trusts anybody. As some of these people say, they trust me, the white Western guy who have nothing in common with, they trust me more than they trust their fellow citizens. And social trust, low social trust, and poverty and lack of social cohesion is, they all go together. They're one and the same thing. And in all these countries, low social trust, they've got arbitrary courts. They've got politicians that don't represent the people, even though they may have elections. The politicians represent, the World Bank and the international financiers and so on. They don't represent the people at all, the peasants. And there's just, it's quite sort of sad and depressing to see there's, gazillions of handicapped homeless people living in shanty towns, dead bodies floating down the river and the most terrible things that would turn your stomach. But these are low trust societies. And again, the low trust societies are poor and have always been poor and will remain poor. So the West was very different. On a relative basis, not that it was perfect, but on a relative basis, the Western countries were far and away more the level of social trust was light years away from where these poor countries were. Now, there was also differences within the white countries. The type of social trust that you would see in, France or Germany, for example, was different than the type of social trust you would see in Britain. So things can get etched onto the national consciousness. Germany being in central, the German states being in Central Europe, for example, was the pathway that all armies that were traveling across Europe in the the medieval times and so on. So Germany was used to being invaded, all the fucking time, and that's been etched onto the German consciousness. You still see it today. They just can't sort of shake themselves off it. And again, when something's etched into your consciousness, the national consciousness for several hundred years, it's very hard not to think that way. But then again, on a relative basis, Germany is a high trust society. Outside is not as much as people internally, which is why they've been, I think, part of the reason why they've been hugely successful in developing local industries and sort of having a nationalist view to export of value-add machinery and so on. The type of social trust in England was different. Again, England hasn't been invaded, or Britain hasn't been invaded for hundreds and hundreds of years. So they have a certain type of social trust there, particularly built or till recently anyway, particularly built around things like property, because it's a stability there. Australia, the same stability. Whereas in countries that are invaded a lot and where the government can arbitrarily seize property or foreign invaders seize it and things like that, there's a much lesser reliance on property as a method of developing wealth. And you see also in other kind of like Japan, for example, property isn't seen as the basis of stability. But they're a very, very high social trust society, the Japanese. So where is the social trust thing going? Because here's, and everyone I know, myself included, I believe very much in that our politicians represented us and were working to improve our lives. I believed that. I didn't doubt it for a second. That they may be incompetent, that they may, from time to time be corrupt, or that they idiots may get elected. That I accepted. But I believed in the main they were attempting to and trying to represent the people that voted for them and make our lives better in some or many ways. I just didn't even doubt that. Wouldn't have entered my head. Courts, judges in courts, I believe the courts were independent. That other than human failing aside, they would make decisions based on the evidence and the facts and consistent with the law. And I believe, I didn't doubt that for a second. I believe that the public service was there to serve the people, and that was their primary mission. And again, idiots and incompetence or the occasional corrupt goon aside, that what they were committed to public service, serving the public, and I believed that. I didn't doubt it. Just any contract, I entered into a contract with, this is at a business level, entering a contract, I believed that the other side or the other participants would adhere to the contract. I didn't think that they wouldn't, or didn't go in with the prejudicial view that they wouldn't. If someone I knew said, could they borrow something from me, I didn't doubt that they would return it, and so on. So at every conceivable level, my perception of the society I lived in, that everybody was more or less, trustworthy. I believe that teachers would teach what was needed to pass exams, and that they would do so in a balanced manner. At every level, I perceived and believed that I could trust other people to behave well. I noticed a difference with people on the very lowest, the poorest, angriest, misguided people, or maybe ex-criminals. I noticed that their perception of social trust was quite different. But they were a very small percentage of people, and people I didn't necessarily mix with every day, or hardly at all, in fact. But the idea of social trust has changed, because today I now firmly believe that the politicians only represent the globalists. They do not represent the people at all. I believe that the media, the journalists and the so on, that may go in for sensationalism. I believe that the journalists and the editors and the media establishment, I believe that have no intention of reporting accurately or telling the truth, none whatsoever, and that everything is now a political narrative designed to influence people rather than to declare the facts. I believe the public service has been thoroughly politicised. The police, for example, are now just globalist enforcers. They're not there to, police the law and crime. They're there to act ideologically and based on the politicized political directions they get and are given. I think the entire upper echelons of the police are now completely politicized. Even the frontline grunts are given you have to attend compulsory propaganda lessons, and so this is the public service, the police, the media, the politicians, the courts, international bodies like the United Nations. These are all corrupted now. Human resource departments infiltrated with diversity, equity, inclusion ideologies. There isn't anywhere. Book publishing companies publishing propaganda and willfully doing so. The whole thing. Universities and colleges turning out activists and instilling activist views, very one-sided activist views. So now I see social trust is being dismantled everywhere, and the social trust is very limited, even to the point of doing business with some companies. You look at you've got to pass through their diversity, equity, inclusion sort of screening process, and they're prejudging you as a straight white male. You're just a damn fucking Nazi, and our job is to root out those Nazis and punish them. That type of stuff, and it's insane. Going into an elevator door opens and there's an angry blue-haired lesbian in the elevator. I'm not going to get into that. I mean, holy fuck! I don't want to be accused of something because I no longer have faith in the justice process. In terms of the Department of Prosecutions, they're likely to determine all crimes on the basis of ideology rather than anything. So this is there are 100 ways that social trust is being broken down. And if you look at some of the business contracts that exist now, they can be well over 100 pages of liability and accountability and so on. So they can fast track someone into court if they don't go along with it. But similarly, in business contracts today, the contracts that certainly I was used to signing were mutually binding. Each of us is obligated to behave in a certain way and deliver certain results within a certain time, or goods and services within a time frame at this or that price, and so on. This has now changed, where one side seeks to obligate the other, but the other side wants to be able to arbitrarily exit the arrangement without penalty and without notice. So some of the contracts that certainly we've been presented with, well, you're locked in. This is them talking to us. You're locked in. You must do these. You're obligated. But we're not obligated to anything. We can exit the contract with like 5 minutes notice, 1 second's notice. We don't have to give you a reason. We don't have to pay you. We don't have to. We're not obligated to anything. And that's a stunning sort of concept of how a business contract should be entered into. What? And it's hard to believe. You sort of gobsmacked when you look at why would anybody think that would be a fair and reasonable contract? Because it's not. So if we insist on mutual obligation, okay, we're obligated, we accept that, but so are you, and you need to accept that. Then more and more we're finding that they'll just walk away. No, not interested. We're only interested in a one-sided obligation. So this causes again a lack of social trust. Also, once a certain threshold of social trust is lost, that it then becomes irrelevant. Don't care. We have the power because we have the money. We've got the money. You want our money. We don't. We can get the service from elsewhere, but you can't as easily get the money from elsewhere. You've got to do what we say in the way we say. So this also creates not only the trust decline, but also a level of corruption and, if you like, arbitrary low-level despotism. But all these things are good. Now, I thought I was a lone voice talking about social trust years ago, and I was one of the very few people that could have seen the difference in social trust around the world in different societies and in a business context, could see it up close and having to go through litigation processes as well from time to time. But now I other people are starting to pick up on it. Other people are starting to pick up on it and talk about it. But it's absolutely essential, with the mass migration, with there are the places that I go into now where they demand to see my fucking passport on the basis, well, if we have to get the passport from them because all these mass migrants are all cheating and tricking us and that. But if we do that to them, it's racist if we don't also do it to you. So you have to show. So this is all part of the wider decline in social trust that never was an issue before, or hardly ever an issue before. And now we're talking about it a bit more widely and a bit more freely. But it's a huge issue. Unless we reverse this decline in social trust, we're destined. It's axiomatic. We're heading like a fucking train in a tunnel to a place where we'll be poor. There'll be a lack of trust. There'll be not only two-tier policing that we see, but two or multi-tier levels of welfare, which again we're already starting to see. So the complete breakdown in societal trust, where no group trusts another, and we're importing millions of people into the West. In Australia, nearly 5 million over the last 25 years. And they all come from very low trust societies. And they're bringing their low trust attitudes with them. You've been fantastic today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.